All right. So it probably doesn't come as any surprise to some of you that the party that is embracing extremism and all sorts of horrible policies would feel the need to continue what they started and trying to suppress the vote. That should come as no surprise. The fact that they're screaming voter fraud when they're the ones committing voter fraud, again, should not surprise anyone that Republicans would do this. But recently, Cleta Mitchell, who is a top Republican elections lawyer, basically said the quiet part out loud. She, I don't know what kind of a function this was that where she said this, but she was talking to, I think, other Republican strategists trying to come up with ways of how to win in 2024. So some of the things that she said are let's see, where did they go? Okay, so this was at an April 15th retreat for donors to the Republican National Committee. And she said, oh, where is it? Come on. First off, she, in essence, said that the Republicans should make it harder for college students to vote in key states. And like I said, they've been doing this for years. This is not something that's new. Let's see, where are her actual quotes? Come on. So, with Republicans now enjoying veto-proof majorities in both of North Carolina's chambers, the party has a chance to crack down on voting by students there. We need to be looking at what are these college campus location polling, and what is that young people effort that Democrats do. They basically put the polling place next to a student dorm, so they just have to roll out of bed, vote, and go back to bed. Because as we all know, that's all you do at college is sleep. You don't do anything else. There is absolutely nothing else to do every day of the week, let alone on election day. All you do is sleep. That's what college is. It's not like it's a place to go to learn something or anything. Anyway, we need to build strong election integrity task forces in those counties. Mitchell added naming Durham, Wake, and Mecklenburg counties, all of which are Democratic strongholds and are home to large colleges. Gee, like I said, she's saying the quiet part out loud because this leaked somehow. Even though it was a Republican retreat, somehow this was reported. And let me go back. It was initially posted online by independent progressive journalist Lauren Windsor. I don't know how she got to it because, this is supposed to be a Republican thing. The Election Integrity Network, which Mitchell chairs, works to build what it calls election integrity task forces, in which volunteers aim to root out fraud and illegal voting. Which, on the surface, sounds like it's a good idea. But based on what she's saying, no, there isn't. How is college students voting election fraud? I mean, Mitchell also lamented that in Wisconsin and Michigan, both of which offer same-day voter registration, polling sites are located on campuses, making it easier for students to register and vote in one trip. Oh, the horror! Making it easier to vote. That's just horrible. How dare they? I mean, seriously, if you're going to register to vote and you don't have either the transportation or the time or whatever, it makes sense to register on the same day you vote. It's I fail to see how this is a problem. So they've registered them in one line and then they vote them in the second line, Mitchell said. Again, I've done that. Nothing wrong with that. Wisconsin is a big problem because of the polling locations on college campuses, Mitchell continued. Their goal for the Supreme Court race was to turn out 240,000 college students in that Supreme Court race. And we don't have anything like that. And we need to figure out how to do that and how to combat that. So, which is it? Do you want college students to vote for you, or do you not want them to vote? Because those are two different goals. Either you want people to vote for you, or you want to prevent them from voting. Not the same thing. The recent race for a seat on Wisconsin's Supreme Court, which was won by the Liberal candidate backed by Democrats, saw record campus turnout. Mitchell also brought up New Hampshire, which has a higher share of college students than any other state, as well as statewide elections that are often decided by just a few thousand votes. The Granite State has seen a series of efforts in recent years to impose stricter rules for student voting, despite no evidence of illegal voting by students. Because, of course, we can't, allow people who would vote for Democrats to win, okay? I just talked to Governor Sununu and asked him about the college student voting issue that has been a problem, Mitchell said, referring to the state's Republican Governor Chris Sununu. He thinks it's fixed. We just need to have an active task force to make sure it's fixed. Do our look back about whether or not they did go back and make sure those college students presented who said they were residents really were. People have been making sure that voter fraud does not exist. There might be some, but they're making it sound like this is an epidemic that is changing elections, and we just don't have the evidence for that. They're just butthurt that they're not voting for them. And obviously that means fraud because they're perfect, they're beautiful. Why wouldn't you want to vote for Republicans? So instead of coming up with things that would make people want to vote for you, let's just say that you voted illegally because you didn't vote for the right party. That makes so much sense. Finally, Mitchell falsely claimed that thanks to President Joe Biden, people who apply for federal student loan aids are required to fill out a voter registration form. Now, first, like you said, that's not a thing. But hey, if that's a way to get out the vote. So I wouldn't say required, but it would be great if when they're, filling out federal forms or going to the DMV or whatnot, why not make it so you can vote, that you could register to vote in multiple places instead of one centralized location? I fail to see the problem. As long as you have people there who know the procedures of registering people, I fail to see the problem. I did that when I was working at a library in Chicago Heights. We registered people to vote. We had someone come in and teach us how the process was done, and then we registered people to vote. And then we sent in the cards, and the feds did the rest. We had nothing to do with actually issuing the cards. We just filled out the forms for them. I fail to see what's the problem with that. I mean, it's for people who can't afford to get to certain areas. This is great. This way they can register to vote and they don't have to go out of their way. I don't see a problem. Let's see. But yeah, nobody is required to fill out a voter registration form. That's just silly. A White House executive order does urge federal agencies, including the Department of Education, to offer voter registration opportunities, but no one is required to register, which again, I fail to see what the problem is. All I'm hearing so far is that Republicans are whining that their policies that students don't like are not enough to get students to like them. That's not how things work. You cannot force people to like you. You can't force people to love you. You have to give them a reason. And if you force them, I'm sorry, how does that make you a good person or a good party in this case? Because it doesn't. If your policies were really that good, then you wouldn't have to either force people or, in their case, prevent them from voting because they would just want to vote for you. Anyway, Mitchell's remarks weren't focused only on student voting. She also declared that if Republicans win full control of Virginia state government this year, they should eliminate early voting and same-day registration in the state. And she said that any group that's got democracy in their name, those are not friends of ours. Just think about that for a second. She is openly saying that we do not want democracy. We want to rule with an iron fist. We want authoritarian rule because what other rule is there? There's authoritarian rule. There's democracy. There's authoritarian. There's totalitarian rule. If you're not a democracy, you're an autocracy. You're an authoritarian. You are not. You're basically telling everybody that you do not value people. You just value power. And you will do whatever it takes to stay in power. And you seem to think that, and you are simultaneously surprised that people don't want to vote for you while you're saying you don't want people to vote. The cognitive dissonance must really hurt. Anyway, she also oh wait, I already read that. But the comments about voting by college students deserve particular scrutiny because of an ongoing multi-state push to tighten the rules for student voters, including by banning student IDs for voting, which for some people are the only IDs they have. Because just because you're eligible for a driver's license doesn't mean people have one because they might not be able to afford one. Let alone afford a car, but they might not be able to afford a driver's license. A voter ID, yeah, you probably could do that, but again, you would have to get to the DMV in order to do that. And if that's a problem for you, it's much easier to just use your college ID. I can't remember if when I started voting, if I used my college ID or my my voter ID, my from the DMV. I really don't remember. I think I used the state ID. I really do. But anyway, Mike Burns, the national director for the Campus Vote Project, which works as an arm of the Nonpartisan Fair Elections Center to expand access to voting for college students, said the tens of millions of students enrolled in higher education across the country already face a unique set of hurdles in casting a ballot. They're less likely than any other voters to have a driver's license or utility bill to use as an ID. They're less likely to have a car to get to an on-off campus polling site, and they often move each year, requiring them to go through the registration process anew each time. Few states, Burns added, designed their election system to address these challenges. Despite Mitchell's fears about students rolling out of bed to vote, a 2022 Duke University study that looked at 35 states found that nearly 3/4 of colleges did not have voting sites on campus. Given this backdrop, it's just that much more exasperating, Burns said, to hear someone talk about intentionally trying to make that even harder and to do it for political reasons. Well, yeah, because college students don't vote for them. The issue of student voting has flared lately thanks to a recent surge in the youth vote. The midterm elections of 2018 and 2022 saw the highest turnout rates for voters under 30 in the last 3 decades. And in 2022, half of all eligible voters under 30 turned out, a stunning 11-point increase from 2016. In 2018, those voters went for Democratic candidates by a 49-point margin, and in 2020, they went for Biden over Trump by 24 points, making them easily the most Democratic-leaning age group in both years. That spurred Republican legislators to take action. This year alone, 3 GOP-controlled states, Missouri, Montana, and Idaho, have tightened their voter ID laws to remove student IDs from the list of documents voters can use to prove their identity. Montana's law was struck down as a violation of the state constitution. Idaho's is being challenged in court by voting rights groups. That is just stupid. I mean, you have to produce documents that you say who you are in order to get a college ID. In order to enroll in college, you need a social security number. It's not like, you can just get these just fall off trees or something. That's not the way college IDs work. One of the Idaho bill's backers, State Representative Tina Lambert, said she was concerned that students from neighboring Oregon or Washington might use their student IDs to vote in Idaho, then also vote in their home state. In fact, there has not been a single instance of fraud linked to student IDs in the state. If only there were a way to double check that. Imagine that. And, okay, where I used to work at a local pantry. Even we had a database linked up with Salvation Army, because we were coordinating the Christmas program, and we could coordinate and find out if someone went to both places to get Christmas gifts, because you weren't allowed to do that. If a couple of nonprofits can do that, I'm sure these states can easily find out, oh, you already voted, and call them out on it, if that were to happen. But it's obviously not happening. Either these people are really stupid, or they think that their constituents are that stupid. I'm not sure which one. Idaho saw a 66% increase in registration by 18 and 19-year-olds between November 18th and September 2022, by far the highest in the country, a Tufts University study found. A fourth state, Ohio, passed a strict voter ID law with a similar impact. Ohio doesn't allow student IDs for voting, but previously it did allow utility bills, so colleges would issue students $0 utility bills to be used for voter ID purposes. The new law, which is also being challenged in court, eliminates that option by requiring a photo ID. So, a photo ID is required, but it can't be a student ID. Can they make it any more freaking obvious that they just don't want students to vote? I mean, they're not even hiding it. In Texas, where growing numbers of young and non-white voters threaten to upend the state's politics, one Republican bill introduced this session would ban polling places on college campuses. The bill's sponsor, State Representative Carrie Isaac, has described it as a safety measure aimed at keeping outsiders off campus, since campus polling places also serve the wider voting public. Wait, what? So suddenly campuses on voting day have to be worried about the scary outsiders coming in, but these are open campuses, so anybody can wander in and out any other time. But oh dear God, we shouldn't have polling places there because strangers might come in. What? I swear, if you were to look at an x-ray of these people's brains, they would look like pretzels because, oh my God. Voter advocates charged in a lawsuit that in 2021 Texas law establishing strict residency requirements would particularly burden college students by preventing them from registering at their prior home address when they temporarily move away for college. A federal judge last year struck down much of the law, but the decision was reversed on appeal. So not only can they not vote in college, they can't vote at home either while they're in college. My God. How much more obvious do you want to be? All right. Efforts to make it difficult for students and other young people to vote are almost as old as the 26th Amendment, which went into effect in 1951, enfranchising Americans aged 18 to 20. Wow, I didn't realize that it's as old as me. In one Texas county with a large historically black university, the chief voting official responded to the measure by requiring students to answer questions about their employment status and property ownership before being stopped by a federal court in a key ruling for student voting rights. I'm sorry. Are these people familiar with the Constitution? Like, at all? My God, what the hell? Following the Supreme Court's 2013 decision weakening the Voting Rights Act, Texas imposed a voter ID law that didn't allow student IDs, even those from state universities, though it did include handgun licenses. And North Carolina passed a sweeping 2013 voting law that, among other steps, ended pre-registration of high school students. This is just maddening. So students who want to get an education, they're totally allowed. But if they want to get an education, nope, sorry, you can't vote. Oh, but you also have a gun? Oh, but by all means, you can do that. Jesus Christ. And pre-registration of high school students. What's wrong with that? I mean, They're still living with their parents, so they can, register to vote, and they're in the system. And once you're in the system, at least in Wisconsin, you can change your address online. So once you're in the system, you can move around. I fail to see why this is so hard. Why this is. Oh, wait. I answered that already. They just don't want people to vote. Because they don't vote the right way. 2 years earlier, Wisconsin passed a voter ID law that does allow student IDs from state universities, but mandates that the ID have an expiration date and have been issued within the last 2 years, requirements that many student IDs don't meet. Though some colleges have created special voter IDs, advocates say the issue still generates significant confusion among students. Now, there's a reason why college IDs don't have expiration dates, because not everyone goes through college at the same rate. And some people go through undergrad and then they go for their master's or their PhD or whatever. So they're in school longer. Why make them get new IDs if they're in the same school and they're still students and they're still enrolled? So of course they don't have expiration dates, because not everybody goes through college at the same rate. And why make them renew it just for what? Just to give them the hassle of having a ID that's valid? The ID is valid. You're in school. You have the transcripts. You have an invoice of the classes you paid for. This is not hard. Alright. So I don't blame students for being confused, because, why do they need a special ID? That's stupid. New Hampshire has often been a hotspot for efforts to restrict student voting. Backers of these efforts have at times argued that students don't have as much stake in the community as other voters, since they might not stick around after college. Okay, even if that's the case, that they don't stick around till, after college, so they're here at most for 4 years, you don't think that policies will affect them in those 4 years? And let's face it, nobody guarantees, unless you buy a house somewhere, then maybe. But for the most part, you can't guarantee that whomever moves into the community will be here long term. There could be all sorts of reasons why a resident ends up moving after like a year or two. It could be being fired, being laid off, finding a better job in a different community, getting married and moving away, wanting to move back home because you want to be closer to your family for whatever reason. There's all sorts of great reasons why people don't stick around. So maybe it might not be as short term as a college student, but they're still affected by these policies, such as this "you're not allowed to vote" thing. God knows what else they're going to do to those students. And you're saying that they don't have a say in what these colleges do to them. That is a great way to get students to just say, I'm going to a different school. So if your goal is to get people to not go to your college, then you're doing a great job. However, claiming that, they won't stick around, maybe not. It depends on the job market. And they certainly won't want to stick around if you make their lives a living hell, telling them that they're second-class citizens and they shouldn't be granted the same rights as everybody else because they don't vote the way you want them to. Of course they're not going to want to stick around then. God, you're assholes. A 2021 bill that died in committee would have barred students from using their campus address to register. People who go to college in New Hampshire, unless they are really bona fide permanent residents, should vote by absentee ballot in their home states, the bill's sponsor, Representative Norman Silver, told Stateline. It's a matter of simple equity. Now, that I'm not completely against. Technically, they are residents of the city that they're in. So they have a right to vote in local elections. However, if they would prefer, doing an absentee ballot back home. But a lot of these kids, they only know what's happening in the community they're living in. They don't know what's going on back home because they're not living there. Now, if it's a situation where, like for undergrad, I lived half an hour away. Even though I still voted in the community I went to school in, I did come home frequently enough. I came home over the weekends. So, in theory, I probably could have voted absentee here. But I'm living in an area where those policies affect my day-to-day. Just because I go home over the weekends doesn't mean that the school's policies didn't affect me, which is local politics. So why would I vote in an election that doesn't concern me? It just makes zero sense. Even though it does sound reasonable at first. Back in 2011, Representative William O'Brien, then the House Speaker and advocating for a bill to tighten residency requirements, was even blunter. They go into these general elections, they'll have 900 same-day registrations, which are the kids coming out of the schools and basically doing what I did when I was a kid, which is voting as a liberal. And there you have it. O'Brien said, "That's what kids do. They don't have life experience and they just vote their feelings, and they're taking away the town's ability to govern themselves. It's not fair." Right, because that's what college kids do. They only vote for their feelings. It's not like they have any intelligence. They're just overgrown 2-year-olds who only want whatever the id tells them. What the hell? Can you just hear the contempt they have for 20-somethings? Because, first off, that's the majority, but occasionally you have non-traditional students, older students, and they do have that life experience that you claim that these kids don't have because they vote liberal. As if that's the benchmark. I'm in my 50s. I still vote for the Democrats, and I do have life experience because the Republicans are asshats, even more so than they usually are. I usually just disagreed with them in policy. Now, their very existence insults my sensibilities because they've just gone full fascist. Not all, but unfortunately the ones that aren't are leaving the party because it's been completely taken over by wackaloons. Burns of the Campus Voter Project said that kind of sentiment not only runs counter not only to the purpose of the 26th Amendment, but to any notion of voting as a civic good. "This is a formative process," said Burns. "We know from research that if people start to vote at a younger age, they will stay involved. It puts them on a trajectory of being more involved in civic life for the rest of their life, and I think that's a good thing." Every community is better when more people have their voices heard, and that includes young people. So, regardless of who someone's going to vote for, we think they should have equal access. Yes, exactly. Okay, so they aren't old enough to vote conservative, which I heard a poll that says that millennials are the first generation that aren't getting more conservative as they grow older, which, like this guy suggested, is a thing. And that's why they should wait till a certain age to vote, because then they might, turn conservative. And that's not happening anymore. Why? Because in previous generations, the Republicans were sane. They weren't so obviously fascist and so obviously full of hate that people could still stomach voting for them. Now, that's not the case. They are being openly fascist. They're being openly bigoted. They're openly advocating to prevent people from voting. They're being completely open about, which I appreciate, because now everyone can see what horrible people they are, as opposed to just a few people realizing that earlier on. But at the same time, it's frightening. And so of course millennials are the first generation. I think it was millennials. They're the first generation that aren't getting more conservative as they grow older. Because the conservatives are no longer reasonable. So what choice do millennials have? Even if they weren't for the Democratic Party, the Republicans are worse. This is actually why we need more than two parties. That way, if you get more conservative, that's great. You'll have a party that speaks to you that isn't completely off the rails. Whereas if you don't agree with what the Democrats are doing because you think they're too far left, well, then there's a party for you. And I've mentioned this before. There are people who are socially liberal but fiscally conservative. There is literally no party for them. They have to choose which is more important, being fiscally conservative or socially liberal. You have to decide which issue means more to you, because neither party completely fits you. So why not have 3, 4, 5 parties? In Europe, and Canada, there are plenty of parties. I think there are at least viable parties in Canada. There might be like 7, 8. Or maybe it's just 5 and 7, 8 is in France. I can't remember. But there are a lot of parties. Some of these countries have so many parties that it's basically one party per person, because it's that many parties. And the difference between some of these parties, because it's on a spectrum, the difference between parties might be extremely minute. Just one little issue, one little difference is enough to create a new party. So you just have to decide which party really matches your views, because you have all sorts of parties. So you could find one that completely matches your views. In this country, you have to decide which views matter more to you than others, because the parties will not necessarily jibe with everything. Except now the Republicans have gone completely onto the crazy train, and so unless you are a racist piece of shit and completely out of your mind, the Republicans aren't going to be speaking to you anymore, because that's whom they're hitching their wagon to. So that's why so many Republicans, who I still probably wouldn't have voted for, and I have plenty of problems with, like, say, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, but they at least give a shit about democracy. They're not at least completely off their rocker. So suddenly they have no party because the Democrats don't fit them. Definitely don't fit them. And the Republicans, well, they kicked them out. So even if they did fit them, just the fact that they voted against Trump, that they spoke out against Trump, was enough to kick them out. So they have nothing. So either they retake the Republican Party back from the absolute wackaloons, or this country should allow more than two parties. And not just allow them, but the way this country is now, that a lot of third parties, they have to go to every state and get on the ballot. And most third parties don't have enough to go onto every ballot. So if you were to vote for, like, Jill Stein of the Green Party, even if she were to have won every state, she literally could not have won the presidency because she didn't have enough electoral votes in the states that she was on the ballot that it would have mattered. So basically, you're throwing away a vote. It should be that you put a party together. You should be able to automatically be in every state and run in every state. And then it's not a throwaway vote. They should be able to run in every state, be able to campaign the way the major parties campaign, so people hear their views, people can see them in debates, and people can honestly pick who they like best, as opposed to, well, I can't pick this person because it's going to take votes away from this candidate, and if this person is in power, say Trump, then we're all screwed. That's just ridiculous. We need more parties. So, if for no other reason, that'll engage more people. Because so many people are fed up with politics. Well, for one thing, because of shit like this, but also because they have to choose which issue matters most to them and vote that party. And then with everything else, they might not get what they want. And that's frustrating because you want to be able to vote for someone who you're proud of. I'm in a happy place. I was not a fan of Joe Biden. I'm thrilled with all the things he's done. Yes, he's done some really horrible stuff, like what's happening in southern border. He's not handling that very well. However, so it's possible to be pleasantly surprised with a candidate you were forced to vote for. But why not be allowed to truly vote for the candidate you want? I mean, if it turns out that most people prefer a certain candidate, fine. But at least everybody got a chance to truly speak their mind and truly vote for whom they wanted, rather than the lesser of two evils. I don't see the problem with that. So, yeah, it's just, yeah, I'm definitely an advocate for multiple parties, and I know that the guys at Crooked Media are just mocking people who want multiple parties because those people want third parties, want Democrats without the baggage. No, maybe some people do. However, that's why we need multiple parties. So if there's someone who's basically Democrats without the baggage, but there is some slight differences, that might still fit people better. So that's why you need more than just a third party. You need multiple parties So everyone gets a say in who they vote for. Um, and if they're able to get their platform out there just the same way as Democrats and Republicans do, then if everything's a level playing field, then people will really be able to get whom they want rather than picking and choosing. Oh, well, I'm going to vote for this person because, well, I don't like him on this and this and this issue, but this person is batshit insane. So I have no choice. That should not be the choice here, people. We should be able to choose who we want based on what we believe is best for the country, not because we're scared of what this other buffoon is going to do. And this video is way too long, so I'm going to stop it there, and I will see you guys next time.